Welcome to today's information governance session on connecting the dots, IG as a core element of corporate governance. Thank you for taking the time to join us today. We're really thrilled to talk to you about information governance and discover together how we can help you in your information governance journey. So before we start, I'd like to share with you a few housekeeping rules. Our meeting is being recorded as at the start and being hosted on Zoom. Here we are sharing a few things to remember. Due to the number of guests expected, you'll be muted upon entry. We will have breaks for Q&A at the end of the session, but we encourage you to ask questions at any time. If you want to ask a question at any point in time, please come off mute or use the chat feature. We will be monitoring. You can also raise your hand in the reaction tab. Lunch certificates were sent from Uber Eats. Please enjoy lunch on us. Please be sure your full name is listed on your display. Unidentifiable parties will be removed from the meeting. You can change your name by clicking on the three dots in the upper right-hand corner of your individual display. At the conclusion of the program, a short survey will appear. We will be really appreciative if you can provide your input. And now let me introduce you to our speaker today. With us, we have Rob Gebrandt, our Managing Director for Information Governance Consulting. Rob brings over 30 years of experience in consulting, complex program management and leadership experience in governance, risk and compliance, and has focused on improving the information governance practices and capabilities of clients around the globe in a range of industries. He has supported clients in the development of information governance strategies and solutions across the financial services and insurance, manufacturing, technology, public sector, and pharmaceutical industries in Canada and globally. Rob, welcome, and thank you for being here today. How are you?
This is a topical conversation for us as practitioners. As we continue to expand our own roles and our own goals, as we build, the world of information governance and expand our own remits. I want to plant a question. We're not going to ask it, and I don't want you to think about answering it, but just put it in the back of your mind and come back to it throughout the session, and maybe at the end of it, come back to it as well. It's a question about how much more effective would you or we all be if we were directly connected to the goals of our board of directors. So put that into your mind. Think about that as we go through this. If we have time at the end, and we're going to try to have time at the end, I look forward to sort of exploring that a little bit as well. So one of the challenges that we go through here, of course, is talking about that connection and trying to build out the relationships and build out the reasons for our being in the domain, other than simply because we manage records. Information governance, as we all know, has really become a topic du jour that organizations are really starting to think about and really starting to build upon. Our viewpoint here is that, as the practitioners in this industry develop their broader perspectives, start connecting with other key players in our organizations, that information governance should have a seat at the table for corporate governance. it's really important for us to reimagine what we do, because as we all know, we've spent a lot of time deep in the trenches, deep in the back offices, deep in the file rooms, but there's a lot more that we bring to our organizations and our community than just being the keepers of a retention schedule. A bit of a background here, you probably are all fairly aware, but our information governance advisory services, what do we do? We help organizations protect, unlock, and transform your most critical assets. It's always interesting, when we think about, is information an asset? Are records an asset? I've got to believe that we would all say yes, yes, yes. But how many of our leaders in our organizations would nod in agreement and actually line up behind us on that? So it's that transformation as we go through. Our practice really works around assessments, strategies, helping organizations to improve their governance practices and capabilities, and throughout the life cycle of our records and our information management activities, increasing that operational excellence side of the house. So through that lens, let's talk about governance. We all know and we've all heard about corporate governance. Some of us are pretty tightly connected to our boards, to our C-suite. Some of us are not, because we all know that it'd be great if we had a much more direct conversation and a much more direct access point. But really, most of us are challenged by that, by our organizations. So the idea of corporate governance, and this is not meant to be a training session on the principles of corporate governance, but really corporate governance, the role of a board of directors and the C-suite is to manage and to execute on these 3 bullet points. The definition of the organization's power structure, the accountability structure, the decision-making process. Those set of tools to effectively manage and run the organization efficiently and effectively. And to create a sense of environmental awareness, ethical behavior, corporate strategy, compensation, risk management. And they're all parts of corporate governance. We've all heard about the ideas of, and we've seen in our respective front page newspapers, whether it's from a Canadian perspective where I am, the Globe and Mail, the New York Times, the London Times, Financial Times, all of the big papers around the world, we see examples of that front page experience where organizations are finding themselves on the front page because they've got poor governance or ineffective governance. So corporate governance really is that driving perspective. The next question really becomes, are we all governance practitioners? Many of us believe we are. In fact, we recently did, working with the Economist Impact, an article and a survey set that's available publicly for everyone to get access to, around how confident our organizations feel that their risk management initiatives are sufficient to mitigate and prevent damage from risks. Now, I think we would all agree that information management or records management or information governance is part of a risk management framework. Now, 73% of executives agree that the lack of standardized evaluation metrics make it difficult to show progress. When we think about how we can fold into that, how do we actually help our organizations define those KPIs? Are we even part of the conversation when it comes down to risk and compliance. Or as I've seen, and I'm sure many of us have seen, that worst case scenario that we're stuck so far down in an organization that we're just not there from a risk management perspective. We're not included in the conversation. We don't have that presence when it comes down to risk management. But we are all governance practitioners, or we should be governance practitioners that can actually influence the direction and help our organizations change the current practices. Information governance. I know of all the people on the call, I'm sure everyone has a different definition of what information governance is. Some of us would think that it's just a fancy name. You know, we've always been records managers. We've been records and information managers. We've been information managers. So what is the name? Why do we think about information governance? Why do we sort of push it? Is it that important? In some cases, yes. In some cases, it's a bit of an uphill battle to get the organizations to really think about corporate governance and information governance across the board. If we look at the image on the screen, that our 10 competencies of information governance, all of these tie together to create that theme of information governance. Now, I imagine there's some on the call that are looking at this and they're saying, some of those make sense to me. Some of those are naturally not part of my conversation. I'm sure the ones at the bottom, the data governance, the IT governance, the analytics, there's people that are looking at that and they're saying, I don't know how to step in that role. I don't know how to play in that space. But information governance gives us the ability to connect the threads, to engage the community across the board, to be able to have an elevated conversation so that we're really able to talk with the executive communities around the ideas of risk management, around the ideas of information as an asset. And wouldn't it be nice if we could also talk to them about how could we actually monetize and extract economic value from our information? That would be the gold standard. If we think about definitions, you know, we've all, again, records management, records information management, we use the, and I'm sure we all do, the ISO 15489 definition. As shown here, it's very technical, very tactical, that allows us to really understand the control of those records themselves. Now, if I look at information governance, however, this is the Gartner definition, and it's the one that Iron Mountain uses as we talk to our clients as well. It's about the three elements that are bolded. It's about decision rights, equipping your colleagues, your leadership, your team members to know what they are allowed to do and what they should be doing in terms of managing and governing information. It also deals with behavior and creating the appropriate behavior. We've all been there before where we've trying to change our organization, or we're in an organization that's going through its own change. And we show up on a Monday morning, turn our computer on, and there's a new icon on our desktop. How often do we actually click on that? More often than not, I would say that it's going to take a couple weeks before we click on that icon, if ever. That's because we haven't touched on the behaviors. We haven't looked at change management to really help the organization move forward. And lastly, information governance is about enabling an organization to achieve its goals. Now, if you think through that definition and you go back to the 3 bullet points that we talked about for corporate governance, there's a really tight alignment here, particularly around that last piece of it, enabling its goals. And again, I question everyone. It's not a poll, but a question just to think about. How are you and how is your function within your organization supporting your organization's achieving its goals? And wouldn't it be nice if you were able to be part of the broad conversation to actually represent how you can achieve those goals? Now, we all know and we've all heard the term data governance. Undoubtedly, in our respective organizations, we have both conversations about data governance and information governance. We're on a conversation about records management as well. But is data governance the same thing? Again, going to the Gartner definition, as we see here, it is about decision rights. It is an accountability framework, but it's really about the behavior, evaluation, creation, consumption, and control of data and analytics. So it's much more focused on the IT lens than on what we would classically look at for records management. This is that opportunity to connect dots, and as I describe it, have IG as a thread to be able to tie together key pieces of an organization. My firm belief is that data governance is a part of information governance and helps the organizations improve their strategies and connect their dots. It allows an organization, by the fact that if we can be at the table of risk management or at the table of the board, to be part of those conversations, it allows us to really continue to connect those dots across the board. So the interconnections of governance is a really important piece here. The IT governance is really tightly tied, and that's a mature practice set. CIOs do that bread and butter, table stakes activities. Data governance, the domain of the chief data officer, the really tight operational focus. That new space that we operate in is information governance. But how do all these things work together? And how should they be able to connect if we're going to elevate the conversation? I use one example, and it's the interrelationship between information governance and cybersecurity. Because I'm sure many of us would say that makes sense, that there probably is. But why is it that way? I use the metaphor of a castle when I'm talking about this. I think that cybersecurity is the walls of the castle. You want it to be tall, thick, impenetrable, strong, layered defensive. Defense is a great moat out front, lots of archer positions and firing holes on it to be able to make sure that nobody gets through that castle wall. But information governance is about growing the garden on the inside, is making sure it's connected, making sure the soil is rich, the information is growing. We're not having a lot of rot and garbage information in there as well. The interesting thing about cybersecurity, and the interesting thing that makes that connection more powerful, is today, cybersecurity is a board imperative. In most organizations, the board of directors will hear from or hear on cybersecurity at least annually. I know at Iron Mountain, our board gets a monthly briefing on cybersecurity. The question that I would have is, why are they not having the same conversation about the information itself? How can we elevate that and create a sense of that? So back to that premise. Should we, as IG practitioners, be at the table with other governance functions in our organizations? It's great to see that there is active engagement. It's great to see that for some of us, we are very close to the C-suite. The more that we can continue to build that up, the more that we can demonstrate our value to our organizations, the more that we can show the organizations that we speak that risk language. That's often a challenge for many of us because, again, we're brought up in that records management role. We're not necessarily as well attuned to the risk management languages of risk tolerances, risk thresholds, risk assessments, risk mitigation, risk acceptance, etc. But is there an opportunity for us to move up there? I would position that the answer is absolutely yes, so that we can continue to rethink our roles and to demonstrate to our organizations that we do a lot more than just store those records. And we do a lot more than just send out those semi-annoying emails to say, please sign off on this destruction. There's a great opportunity here to talk about risk. Back to the thought about IG and why should we think about information governance? And how do we have these conversations with our board and with our risk teams? Again, if we go back to those ideas of the decision rights themselves, we've all got the right controls. We've all got the right rules of retention and disposition. Are we making them clear for not only the end user employee, but for the end user executive as well? And how do we accelerate alignment, decision making, by having a simple and consistent process? How do we build that practice and embed it right into the business itself? How do we influence the culture of our organization through behaviors? How do we rethink what our team members and the organizational team members do with information? How do we empower and embed behaviors? Wouldn't it be nice if the functional business managers across our respective organizations perhaps had one line in their job descriptions or in their job objectives that talked about managing information? Because we all know that, and I think we would all believe, of course, that the classic definition of a record is that output of a business process. It's a business process. Business own it. Why is it that the business have been so quickly to say, oh, you're taking care of records, it's your job, right? We want to push from that governance side of the house that the organization should step back into that role, create those behaviors, create traceability across the organization. Make sure that the executive team understands that there is that thread. Cybersecurity, as we said, a great thread to pull on. How do we as practitioners elevate our strategic orientation How do we raise the bar for ourselves? We need to transform our conversation, transform our language to include the themes, the business practices of information risk and value, the two sides of every coin, risk and value. We want to make sure that we're able to explain and articulate in a leader's terms the value that can be gained by integrating information governance with things like cyber and bringing those threads together so that we're actually differentiating and elevating our conversations and helping the organization mitigate their overall risk. And lastly, achieving goals. Wouldn't it be nice if we were able to stand up and be able to have traceability through to the organizational goals, the organization's profit that showed we connected to that practice, we connected to that outcome. We did that by reducing information noise, and information noise in all its forms, whether it's the amount of rot that resides, whether it's the fact that everybody uses the email system as a records management system instead of where they should be putting it. And how do we help improving and enhancing sustainment, right? Sustainable practices. How do we also connect dots to ESG and be able to demonstrate that, yes, information governance, our domain, can influence and have an outcome on the ESG side of the house. So for us, it's very much an approach of understanding and looking at those uncontrolled information sprawls. And how do you drive those outcomes? How do you evaluate and mitigate the rot information impact? How do you understand and update your retention rules on a regular basis? In many cases, of course, we all know that, generally speaking, retention rules are quite stable, except in those instances where you're moving into a new jurisdiction, or you're standing up a new business line, or perhaps you're going through a merger, acquisition, or divestiture exercise. Those challenges create a lot of upheaval when it comes down to retention obligations. How do we improve visibility between physical and electronic? How do we create that unified view so that we're all talking and applying those great rules that we've got to everything uniformly? How do we integrate and optimize business processes? How do we support our business leaders and colleagues in revamping their business processes? Lord knows we all go through digital transformations, and we've probably all been through those situations where the outcome of digital transformation was simply taking the exact business process that was done manually and putting it into a computer. We haven't done anything to improve it. We've just recorded it, tracked it, executed it. That may not be the right model. That may not be the right way to think about it from an information value perspective. And lastly, of course, how do we get our people to really appreciate their role in managing information effectively and in a timely manner? How do we provide easy button training? How do we integrate our accountabilities, our requirements into their job descriptions? How do we create that true partnership with the business so that there's a great communications opportunity? There's a great awareness opportunity across the board. So yes, we should be at the table. if organizations proactively dedicate sufficient financial, technological, and human resources to risk management, today, 62% of respondents think they need to improve. We can step in there. We can add value, add perspective. We can be a bridge in many organizations around retention and disposition. We can certainly be a bridge between the physical and the digital side of the house. We can influence change in our organization. We can help align on the goals. Again, going back to those 3 bullet points around corporate governance, we're influencing the outcomes there. We're tying ourselves into the organization and embedding ourselves in a much richer manner to have those conversations and prepare ourselves accordingly. Because soon enough, and we've all heard the noise over the past few months around AI. How do we get this beast and how do we approach this? I like to think that AI and IG are closely related. If you look at the graphic here, it was provided by an organization called the Infotech Research Group out of London, Ontario. They created this AI governance framework. And it really looks a lot like IG. There's a lot of commonality there. So we should be able to think about how can we extend our arms towards ensuring that view of ethical AI, that view of having effective use of AI that is protective of our organization as well. So, in closing, I'll leave this up for a moment. Narendra Modi really spoke to the idea of corporate governance when he met with this quote, because it does come down to transparency. The transparency is the right to information, while openness is the right to participation. We've got to help our organizations build transparency. We've got to help them create that openness that allows us to participate at the board, in the C-suite, and at the risk management tables. So I go back to my original question that I posed for you. How much more effective would you be if you were directly connected to the board of directors or the C-suite? I hope we've given you some thoughts to think about there, some connections to explore there, some reasons to have conversations with your leadership to get a seat at the table. One of the ways that we do this as well is through partnerships. We work with AWS to be better together, to allow organizations that are really pushing in how do they automate, how do they transform themselves on the digital at petabyte scale across the board. We can help organizations through our exercises, through our partnership with AWS to achieve just that.